Okay, today we are going to continue our learning about solving equations. And the goal, if you remember from last class, the goal for solving an equation is to find the number value of the variable. And one way we can do that is by isolating the variable or getting the variable alone on one side of the equal sign. That means all the numbers will be on the other side, and that tells us the value of the variable. So just before the notes, you did a little activator and you were looking at the new kind of problem that we are solving today. And hopefully what you noticed was that in the types of problems we're doing today, they're a little more complicated because in these kinds of problems, we have variables on both sides. So what that does is it adds a step to our solving process, but the solving process is exactly the same. Whatever we do to one side of the equation, we do to the other side of the equation. So I've listed the steps on your notes for today, and you can see them here. Our first step again is to distribute. That's always our first step, is to get rid of any parentheses that we see. And then we have this new step here. Step 2 is to eliminate the variables from one side. So before we do anything else, we want to eliminate the variables from one side. And how do we do that? We do it the same way that we undo addition and subtraction. We're just going to either add or subtract to turn the number in front of the variable into a zero. So let's take a look at, and then from there, it's the same. Then we end up with just a regular two-step, and you guys did a great job on that last time. So you undo addition and subtraction first, and then you undo multiplication and division second. So let's get started here with this example 1. So if you are copying these in your spiral, you don't need to copy all of this. You can keep this up. You can copy it later. But let's take a minute and copy example 1. So example 1 says negative 2 times x plus 4 has to equal 6 times x minus 12. So these sides are the same. We're going to look, our goal is to find out what number could we substitute or plug in for x to make both sides be the same. So I'm going to start like I started last time. We're going to just draw a line down the middle. Now I see that I have two variables. So you can circle them if you want when you see that there's two, but when I see that there's two, I need to eliminate one. I need to get rid of one group of x's. It doesn't matter which one you eliminate. You can eliminate either one. So what does matter is what I suggest you do is eliminate the smaller one. It'll make your job easier when we get into inequalities. But again, it doesn't matter. You will get the same answer if you do the calculations correct. So on this side of the equation, we have negative 2x, and on this side, we have a positive 6x. So if I want to eliminate the smaller x, that would be negative 2. The way I undo a minus 2x is the opposite. So on minus 2, we're going to add 2. We're not trying to separate the x from the 2. We're just trying to turn it into a 0, get rid of it. So negative 2 plus 2 would be 0, so that's gone. And we're left with 4 on this side. But now I added 2x to one side, so I have to add 2x to the other side. And if we remember back to our combining like terms, we have to add x's to x's. So when I add the two x's, they're going to go with the 6x, not the minus 12. X's can't be grouped with 12s, with just numbers. So 6x plus 2x is 8x. And then we bring down the minus 12. So now this looks just like all the problems we've been doing the last two class periods. We have a two-step equation. So in order to solve this, now we go back up here. We need to undo addition or subtraction first. So I am going to circle my variable here now that I see it's attached to a times 8 and a minus 12. So I'm going to undo the subtraction first by doing the opposite, adding 12. If I add 12 to one side, I have to add 12 to the other side. You can draw these lines or not, whatever makes sense for your brain. And so 12 plus 4 is 16. I would love it if you're using those Desmos calculators to help with your calculation. That would be a great way to avoid some calculation errors. All right, and then now we have a times 8. So the opposite of times 8 is divide by 8. And 16 divided by 8 is 2. And so when we are finished now because x is alone. And what this tells me is that if I take the number 2 and substitute it in, negative 2 times 2 plus 4 will give me the same as 6 times 2 minus 12. So we solved the first example on our note sheet. All right, let's take a look at another one. So if you will copy this one into your spiral, unless you're using Kami, we have 2 parentheses, m minus 3, end of parentheses, equals m plus 5. All right, we're asked to solve this. So when I first take a look here, draw my line down the middle, I notice a couple things. I notice I have m's on both sides and I have parentheses on one side. So my first step is to distribute, to get rid of the times 2 here on the outside. So I'm going to just multiply that in. 2 times m is 2m. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6 equals m plus 5. So now this looks just like the one we did last. There's m's on both sides. So step 2 is to eliminate the variables from one side. And I have 2 m's on this side. And I just need to remember, if I don't see a number, the coefficient is 1. So I have 1m and 2m. If you follow what I recommend is to eliminate the smaller m, we'll eliminate 1m. Again, though, it doesn't matter. If you do it the opposite direction, you'll just be working with more negative numbers. So to get rid of a 1m, to eliminate a 1m, positive 1m, I'm going to subtract 1m. And if I subtract 1m from this side, I'm going to subtract 1m from this side. But we have to use like terms, combine like terms. So I can't subtract 1m from the 6. I have to subtract 1m from the 2m's. So then what I'm left with, 2m minus 1m is just 1m. We have a minus 6 that we haven't touched yet. And then over here, my m's canceled out, and I'm left with just a positive 5. The m's are gone. Now we have a basic, actually this looks like a 2-step equation, but it's a 1-step equation. Let's take a look at why. So now if I circle my m is attached to a minus 6 and a times 1. We're going to move on to step 3, and we undo the addition and subtraction first. So I think you guys are getting pretty good at this. To get rid of a minus 6, I'm going to add 6. And if I add 6 to one side, I have to add 6 to the other side. So now I'm left with 1m equals 11. And what some of you might know is that this is just m equals 11. We're actually done with this one. If you weren't sure, let's think about this. M is attached to a times 1. So in order to eliminate a times 1, we would divide by 1. But any number divided by itself, by 1 is itself. So we would end up with m equals 11. This last step you don't have to do. When you get to the green step, if you recognize that you're done, you can just stop and know that your answer is m equals 11. So if we were to take this 11 and put it in here, 11 minus 3 times 2 would equal 11 plus 5. Okay, let's move on to our next example. So in your spirals, if you can copy negative 7c equals negative 4c plus 9. So when I start this problem and take a look, I notice that I have c's on both sides of the equal sign. So that means that I am going to need to eliminate a variable first. Now I have negative 7 and negative 4. I said that I encouraged you or recommended that you get rid of the smaller variable. So in this case, negative 7c is the smaller variable. But let's look and see what happens if I get rid of this negative 7c. If I do the opposite of negative 7, a plus 7c, I can do that. But look at what happens then. I'm left with 0 equals 3c plus 9. Now I can do that and then move things around, but this is not the most efficient way to do this. When you have a situation where this variable is the only thing on one side, you're going to want to move the variable that's attached to the number, because then you won't end up with a 0 on one side. So instead of taking away negative 7c, I'm going to take away the negative 4c. And so the opposite of negative 4c is plus 4c. And if I add 4c to one side, I add 4c to the other side. And so now you'll see I don't have 0 on either side. All of my c's are on this side, and my number, because that gets eliminated, is on that side. It just makes it keeps us from doing an extra step. So again, if you only have variables on one side, you just want to leave the variables there. Now I can see that my c is attached, it's just one thing. It's just attached to a times negative 3. So the opposite of times is divide by negative 3, which will eliminate the coefficient. And I'm left with c equals negative 3. So if you have only a variable on one side, you want to just keep the variables on that side, eliminate the other variable. All right, let's copy our final problem for our notes. 10p minus 6 equals 4 plus 8p. All right, and so for this one, when I start and I look at it, see how this one's different? Both p's have numbers associated with them. So I am going to just draw my line down. I can pick either p to eliminate. I'm going to pick the smaller one. So I have 10 p's on this side and I have 8 p's on this side. So I'm going to get rid of a plus 8p by subtracting 8p. If I subtract 8p on one side, I have to subtract 8p on the other side. And so that has to go, p's have to be subtracted from p's. So this negative 6 is going to stay separate. We end up with 2p minus 6 equals 4. So the p's are gone. I have 2p. You have 2p. So p is attached to two things. It's a regular two-step, minus 6 and times 2. So we have to undo addition and subtraction first. So we will add 6 to both sides to get rid of the minus 6. And I'm left with 2 times p equals 10. Now 2 times p, I'm going to divide by 2 to eliminate a times 2. And I'm left with p equals 5. So the steps we do are the same as we learned last class, but we've added a step. So we have variables on both sides. You need to eliminate the variables from one side first. As soon as you're done taking your notes, we're going to do some practice on this. So please have your notes out when you start your practice, which will be an escape room. The directions to the escape room are on the next page. And please let me know if you have any questions. You can email me or you can ask the teacher.